Perhaps the happiest moment in a woman's life is the instant she learns she is about to become a mother. But can you imagine, at that very moment, my husband only muttered a cold, dismissive phrase before turning back to his phone. And from then on, my entire pregnancy became a journey marked only by indifference, disdain, and in the end, ruthless betrayal from the very people who should have stood beside me. And yet, just when I thought I had completely broken, a mysterious silver box appeared carrying my father's secret and a plan he had prepared long ago. That was the moment everything shifted, justice was served. Truth was laid bare, and those who had once sought to destroy me were forced to pay the price. This is my story. A story of betrayal of justice and of the strength a woman can discover within her own pain. Chapter 1. The joyful news and the cold indifference. I still remember that fateful morning when 2 pink lines appeared on the pregnancy test. My hands trembled as if they no longer belonged to me. My heart pounded violently each beat, threatening to burst through my chest. My whole body was flooded with a pure happiness I had dreamed of since childhood, back when I played with dolls and imagined the day I would have a child of my own. I stepped out of the bathroom, clutching the test like it was a winning lottery ticket. Andrew, I called, my voice breaking with emotion. He was sitting in a chair, eyes glued to his phone, wearing that familiar look of indifference. I held out the test before him, waiting for the moment he would leap up, spin me around in his arms, and cheer at the thought of becoming a father. But Andrew only gave it a quick glance, his eyes skimming over it as if it were some outdated phone directory, then shifted back to his screen. He let out a short reply, "That's fine." His tone was as careless as if I'd just told him we were out of milk in the fridge. I froze. My entire world was spinning, yet the man I loved remained calm, detached, as if there was nothing worth caring about. The wave of joy that had just surged in my chest shattered into 1,000 pieces, leaving behind a hollow, icy void. That night I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep, clinging to the dream of beautiful things. I imagined a photo shoot to announce the news a cake with the words, "Coming soon," the overwhelming joy of our loved ones upon hearing. I pictured shopping trips for baby clothes, warm, congratulatory hugs, the excited questions about names and nursery colors. But when I turned to look beside me, Andrew was still glued to his phone. No discussion, no spark of excitement in his eyes. He simply drifted into sleep as if nothing extraordinary had happened that day. And there I lay, caught between the flutter of hope and the creeping loneliness that had just begun to seep into my heart. That was the beginning of a journey I never imagined would be filled with wounds, betrayal, and horrifying truths hidden behind those who seem closest to me. Chapter 2. Early Hopes and First Disappointments. The day of my first prenatal appointment drew near, and inside me rose an excitement like a child waiting for Christmas. I had taken the day off work, carefully prepared a small notebook to jot down every word of the doctor's instructions. I even packed a few snack bags in my purse, knowing Andrew tended to get irritable when hungry. In my mind, this was the day we would hear our baby's heartbeat together, shed tears of joy, and hold hands tightly. But as I sat in the cold waiting room, my phone buzzed. Andrew's message flashed on the screen, "I've got an urgent meeting." Just go by yourself. Just get the basic info. I looked around the room at the other couples sitting hand in hand, eyes sparkling with anticipation. The empty chair beside me felt like it was mocking my hopes. Dr. Martinez smiled kindly as she placed the ultrasound probe on my belly. The sound of a strong heartbeat filled the room, fast, vibrant, so alive that it made me burst into tears. But those tears were seen only by me and a stranger in a white coat. Andrew wasn't there to hear his child's heartbeat. He wasn't there to wipe my tears. When I brought the ultrasound photo home, my hand trembling as I handed it to him, he gave it a brief glance before setting it on the kitchen counter, right next to junk mail and grocery flyers. He muttered a single word, Yeah, fine. I kept silent, but inside a vague ache began to grow. At the following appointments, his absence continued. The excuses always sounded important: client presentations, traffic jams, urgent meetings. Eventually, I stopped texting him reminders. Disappointment became a routine while hope shrank day by day. I tried to cling to small dreams. I pictured him sitting beside me, helping choose names, crib colors, or stroller styles. But whenever I brought it up, Andrew brushed me off. It's too early, don't pressure me. At the time, I didn't realize I was speaking to a man who had already chosen to stand outside of this sacred journey. At night, I still dreamed of a home filled with laughter of a husband, wrapping his arms around both me and the baby. But when I opened my eyes, reality was nothing more than a cold, indifferent silhouette beside me, face glowing with the blue light of his phone screen. The hope within me hadn't died completely, but it had begun to waver, and I had no idea that these first cracks were only the beginning of a collapse far more brutal. Chapter 3. Salt in the Wound, from family Sunday dinners at Penelope's house. Andrew's sister gradually turned into a nightmare for me. The long dining table, the bright lights, the carefully plated dishes, everything looked dazzling, yet it only made me feel more out of place than ever. I often rested my hand on my belly, waiting for someone to ask, waiting for congratulations, waiting for a glance of concern. But instead, all I received were cold, cutting stares. Penelope would narrow her eyes at me as though I were an irritating puzzle. Violet, my sister-in-law, often leaned in to whisper something to her, and then both would cast scrutinizing looks in my direction. I never knew what exactly went through their minds, but I could feel the distaste beneath their faint smiles. One evening, Penelope leaned toward me, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You look tired. Are you sure you can even take care of yourself?" I forced a smile and replied, "I'm fine. It's just the usual things that come with pregnancy." But she repeated the word usual with a bitter twist, as if it were something dirty. Then she spoke each word like salt rubbed into my skin. "Not everyone is cut out to be a mother. Some people simply don't have the ability, and there's nothing shameful about that." I went numb. Violet nodded in agreement, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction at seeing me falter. I stammered, "I think I'll be a good mother," but Penelope let out a thin laugh, tapping her long polished nails against the table. "Oh dear, you can't even manage your own life. Last month you called in sick 3 times. You cry at TV commercials, and you think you'll raise a child." The room sank into silence, broken only by the steady ticking of the wooden clock. I turned to Andrew, praying he would speak up, defend me, but he kept calmly slicing his steak, chewing slowly as if the conversation had nothing to do with him. I excused myself to the bathroom. In that small room, I buried my face in my hands and let the tears flow, the humiliation squeezing tight around my chest. When I returned to the table, they had already moved on to another topic: lavish summer vacations. In their plans, there was no place for a newborn child. What hurt most was watching Andrew play with Arya's children, his younger sister's kids. He became a completely different man, gentle, patient, his eyes brimming with love. He taught them how to throw a ball, helped build towering pillow forts, and laughed with them as though he were the most wonderful uncle in the world. I stood by the window, one hand on my belly. Why wasn't that love reserved for our own child? Why could he laugh with them, yet brush off every attempt I made to prepare for our future cribs, strollers, baby clothes? Every time I brought it up, he would only shake his head. "It's too early. Don't push me. Don't make a big deal out of it." Those words echoed again and again like a hammer, chipping away at my faith. I began to feel utterly alone in my own marriage. And that loneliness only deepened when I realized even my own mother wasn't on my side. Chapter 4. The Only Light, Chelsea. In the days when I felt the whole world had turned its back on me, there was only one person who never abandoned me. That was Chelsea. She wasn't loud, she wasn't showy, she didn't make empty promises. Chelsea simply was there when I needed her, I remember the time I texted her, "Tomorrow I have an ultrasound, but I'll probably have to go alone again." Immediately, Chelsea replied, "I'll take the day off. I'll go with you." And the next morning, she really showed up carrying a flask of ginger tea and a small bag of cookies. She sat beside me in the waiting room, held my trembling hand, and when the blurry image of my baby appeared on the screen, Chelsea cried before I even did. She didn't need to pretend. She was genuinely happy for me, giving me the feeling that this joy was still worthy of being shared, even if my husband and my family were cold and indifferent. There were days I was so exhausted I couldn't stomach anything but dry crackers. Chelsea would show up with a pot of hot soup, its aroma filling the silent kitchen. "You don't have to do this," I said, my eyes red with tears. She just smiled. I know, but I want to." She helped me fold the tiny newborn clothes I had secretly bought, as if nurturing my fragile hope. Chelsea listened to every one of my worries, and instead of interrupting or belittling me, she sat quietly, waited until I'd said everything, then answered with a tight embrace. Each time she laid her hand on my belly, her eyes overflowed with tenderness. It wasn't obligation, it wasn't pity, it was reverence. She made me believe that this journey wasn't only about fear, but also about a miracle. While blood relatives scorned me, turning me into a subject of ridicule, Chelsea gave me something more precious than anything else: recognition. She reminded me that my joy was real, my pain was real, and that I deserved love and protection. Those small moments became the lifeline that kept me from sinking entirely into darkness. In a house devoid of laughter, Chelsea was the single candle, lighting the fragile hope I held on to until the day my baby was born. I didn't realize then just how much I leaned on Chelsea. I only knew that without her, I might have fallen long ago. Chapter 5. A Lonely Birth. The first contraction struck close to midnight. It sliced through my back like a knife, radiating down into my belly until it stole my breath. I clutched my stomach, feeling each tightening wave as my heart pounded wildly. I turned to Andrew, gently shaking his shoulder. "Andrew, I think it's time." He blinked groggily, frowning as if I had just woken him from a beautiful dream. "It's only starting. You've got a long way to go. Just rest. We'll go in the morning." Then he rolled over and went back to sleep, leaving me trembling through the contractions alone. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding my belly gasping for air with each surge of pain. I counted the intervals, 12 minutes apart, then shrinking to 8. Panic rose like a tide inside me. I shook him again, my voice almost pleading. "We need to go to the hospital. Please." With a sigh, he dragged himself up, moving as if he were heading to a meeting, not to the birth of his son. I texted several relatives, hoping anyone would come. But all I got was silence, unanswered calls, unread messages. At the hospital, I was dressed in a flimsy gown, lying on the bed as relentless contractions tore through me. Andrew slumped in a chair, head tilted back, fast asleep, not even reaching out to hold my hand. The room was blindingly white, the fluorescent lights harsh, the monitor beeping steadily. I prayed for the door to open for someone to rush in, but all I heard was the faint sound of his snoring in the corner. "Where's your family?" the nurse asked gently, sympathy in her voice. I swallowed hard. "They're all busy." The contractions surged harder, tears streaming down my face. I thought I would have to give birth in silence with nothing but machines and indifference around me. But then the door burst open. Chelsea appeared, breathless, hair plastered by rain, her coat dripping wet. She rushed to my side, grabbing my hand, her eyes wide with worry. "I'm here. The traffic was awful, but I couldn't let you go through this alone." I broke down, clutching her hand. In that moment, the loneliness dissolved. Not Andrew, not my in-laws, not even my own mother. But Chelsea was the one standing beside me when I needed it most. All through the night, she stayed by me, wiping sweat from my brow, reminding me to breathe, even challenging the doctors when they wanted to rush the delivery. Let her follow her body's rhythm. Chelsea insisted firmly. While Andrew slept soundly, it was Chelsea who whispered encouragement through every wave of pain, who gripped my hand when I thought I would collapse. And then the next afternoon, amid the piercing cry of new life, my son James was placed on my chest, tiny yet brimming with vitality. I held him close, tears mingling with my smile. In that moment, I knew I had made it through on my own, and I understood more clearly than ever who truly counted as family. Chapter 6. The Silver Box and My Father's Secret. I had barely begun to cradle James in my arms, gazing at his tiny flushed face, when a soft knock echoed at the door. Nurse Patricia stepped in, carrying a polished silver box, its surface etched with intricate patterns. She smiled kindly, though there was a hesitation in her eyes. "Someone asked me to give this to you," she said. "They instructed me to deliver it only when you had given birth, and only if you gave birth alone." I froze. Alone, the word pierced my heart like a needle. I glanced around the room. Andrew was slumped in the chair, oblivious to the presence of his newborn son. Neither his family nor my mother had come. Yes, I was alone. On the lid of the box was a small brass plate engraved with a name that made my chest tighten. Jackson Reeves, my father. The man who had left me forever, just weeks before James's birth. My hand trembled as I reached for the tiny key attached to the box. The click of the lock opening echoed in the quiet room, sharp yet sacred. Inside was lined with deep red velvet, and at the center lay a thick envelope sealed with red wax. Pressed into the wax was the imprint of my father's ring, the one he had worn every day throughout my childhood. Tears welled in my eyes. Just the faint whiff of the woodsy scent from the wax brought memories rushing back. I unfolded the letter, the familiar handwriting of my father appearing before me, shaky yet firm. "My beloved daughter, if you are reading this, it means what I feared most has come true. You have just given birth to your son, and you are alone. I know this because I saw it all before. I saw Andrew's neglect, the contempt of his family, and even the coldness of your own mother. I hoped I was wrong, but it seems I was right. That is why I had to prepare for this day." My tears fell onto the page, blurring the ink, but I forced myself to continue. Inside the envelope were stacks of legal documents, the deed to an old house worth over $1 million, shares in a company, and a trust fund of several $100,000, all in my name. I nearly lost my breath. My father had left me more than assets. He had left me a shield, a fortress. And among the stark legal clauses, one line blazed like a ray of light slicing through the darkness. "Anyone who abandoned you during childbirth, Andrew, his family, or anyone else, will be permanently excluded from any rights to this inheritance. I hired attorneys to ensure no one can overturn it." I was stunned. My father had seen it all, even while alive. He knew the path I would face, and he had forged an armor of justice for me. Chelsea stood by my side, eyes wide, whispering softly, "See, your father is still protecting you, even when he's no longer here." I pressed the letter to my chest and looked down at James. In that moment, I knew I was no longer the fragile woman they had trampled. I was the daughter of Jackson Reeves, the mother of James, and from that day forward, I would never be alone again. Chapter 7. Proof of Betrayal. I thought the silver box only held my father's assets and his final words to me. But when Chelsea placed the stack of documents back inside, her finger brushed against a strange gap. She tugged gently at the velvet lining on the bottom, and a hidden compartment appeared. Inside was a thin, plain white envelope, no wax seal, no markings. It was far smaller than the legal files, but the moment I held it, it felt as heavy as a stone pressing against my chest. I opened it. Inside were printed transcripts of text messages. The names at the top of each thread made my breath catch: Penelope, Violet, Andrew, and even my mother. My hands shook violently as I read. She's becoming more and more delusional about being a mother. We need to drag her back down to reality before it's too late. Penelope. Exactly. Let her start doubting herself. Better she collapses before the baby comes. Andrew's reply, cold curt. I couldn't believe my eyes. My husband, the man who shared my bed, the one meant to protect me, had been conspiring to push me over the edge. Other threads revealed even crueler truth. Violet suggesting they should cancel any plans whenever she asked for help, make her feel like a burden. A relative, Zach added, question every decision she makes, then call it concern. She'll break down on her own. And then like a blade straight to the heart, I saw my mother's number. Her message was just one line. She's always dramatic. Don't indulge her. The room spun around me. For months I'd asked myself, am I too sensitive? Am I overreacting? But no, the coldness, the indifference, the loneliness suffocating me. It hadn't been in my head. It was a deliberate plan. Chelsea's hand gripped my shoulder, her voice breaking. This isn't just neglect. This is psychological manipulation. They wanted you to break. I clutched the papers tightly. Pain erupted in my chest, but alongside it came something else, a surge of strength. Before I had only felt abandoned. Now I had proof. Proof that they had betrayed me, conspired against me, tried to erase me until I was nothing more than a shadow. I looked over at James sleeping quietly in his crib. And right then I made a vow my son would never grow up surrounded by these cruel people, and I, with all my love and with the shield my father had left me, would never allow myself to fall again. Chapter 8. The confrontation at the hospital. The door swung open as I clutched the stack of papers in my hands. Andrew walked in, his hair perfectly styled, as if he had just left a party instead of rushing to see his wife and newborn son. Right behind him was Ella, holding a cheap bouquet of daisies, hastily bought from a store near the hospital. Darling Andrew exclaimed, his face feigning enthusiasm. I'm so sorry. The traffic was awful, but I'm here now. I glanced at the clock. James had been born more than 2 hours ago. I had already signed the birth certificate, filling in my name under mother, while the space for father remained blank. I turned back to him, my voice like iced traffic fine. Ella stepped forward, shoving the flowers into my hands with a strained smile. We feel terrible for missing it, but, unexpected work, the traffic, so many things. I cut her off, my tone calm but sharp. No, I don't know. I don't know what it means to be too busy to witness the most important moment in your son's life. Andrew furrowed his brows, trying to reclaim control. Don't exaggerate. I'm here now. That's what matters. Let me hold the baby. He reached toward the crib. I stepped in front of James. No. He froze, shocked. What? He's my son, too. I locked eyes with him, each word like steel. A father is there when his child is born. A father stands by his wife, not snoring in the corner. A father doesn't put a game above the lives of his wife and child. Do you really think you deserve to call yourself a father? The room fell silent. Ella shrank back, her face pale. At that moment, Chelsea stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. Perhaps you need to hear this. She lifted the papers my father had left, the legal seals gleaming under the hospital lights. Andrew snatched them, flipping through his face, shifting from shock to fear to despair. Chelsea read aloud. Anyone who abandoned her during childbirth will be permanently excluded from all rights to the inheritance. Ella blurted out, her voice trembling, Inheritance. What inheritance? Chelsea continued without hesitation. The Riverside estate worth over $1 million. 15% shares in Evergreen Soap. A trust fund of $400,000, all in her name. And the entire Mitchell family is excluded. Andrew staggered back, his lips trembling. No, that's impossible. That old man never said. I cut him off, my voice steady and stronger than ever before. He didn't need to say it to you. He knew who you were. He saw how you treated me, and he decided I don't need a family like this. Chelsea raised the second bundle, the printed text messages from the hidden compartment. She read them slowly, each word slicing the air. Make her doubt herself. Let her collapse before the baby comes. Then she looked Andrew straight in the eye. Do you remember these were your words? Andrew went rigid, sweat beading on his temples. Ella collapsed into a chair, her hands trembling. I lifted James, pressing him against my chest. I didn't need to scream, didn't need to argue. My silence, together with the evidence in hand, was a verdict no one could contest. I raised my head, meeting Andrew's gaze one last time. All you had to do was show up, but you chose not to, and now you've lost everything. The room was utterly still, broken only by the steady breathing of James. For the first time in months, the silence no longer terrified me. It was the silence of justice, of truth, finally laid bare. Chapter 9. Liberation and Rebirth. I left the hospital on a pale afternoon, holding James tightly in my arms, Chelsea walking beside me like a quiet pillar of strength. Andrew sat silently on a plastic chair while Ella kept her head down over a wilted bouquet of flowers. I didn't look back. I knew that once that door closed behind me, it also closed forever on those who had abandoned me at the most important moment of my life. Chelsea took James and me to her home. The small living room with its soft yellow walls and morning light streaming through the glass window felt like an embrace wrapping around us. In that space, for the first time, I could breathe freely. 3 months later, it had become our world. At night, I nursed James in the quiet, his steady breath syncing with my heartbeat. During the day, Chelsea carried him out into the garden so he could see the blue sky and the trembling leaves. We folded tiny baby clothes together, sang lullabies in whispers. For the first time in months, happiness felt real again. Andrew, however, never stopped intruding. Text calls, voicemails all cycling through 3 familiar tunes, at first feigned concern, then panic, and finally begging. I miss you. I miss the baby. Can we talk? You disappearing like this is irresponsible? The baby needs a father. I know I was wrong. I promise I'll change. Don't make this harder. I listened but felt nothing. His words were like weak knocks on a door long since locked. I no longer had room for late, hollow remorse. His family launched a new campaign. On social media, Penelope spread lies about me, claims of depression, paranoia, of being too sensitive from pregnancy hormones. But the truth and the evidence my father had left were undeniable. Friends and distant relatives reached out, many offering encouragement. Some even calling just to say, "You did the right thing. They don't deserve you." Even my mother tried to reach me, leaving hesitant messages, "I'm sorry. Maybe I was too harsh. I still love you." But I didn't reply. Love cannot be defined by indifference during the moments when your daughter is in the deepest pain. In Chelsea's home, I learned how to heal. I no longer had to fight against cold stares, no longer had to stifle my tears in the bathroom after family dinners. What I had instead was true friendship, a child's laughter, and the growing belief that I could rise from the ruins. One morning, when James laughed out loud at his own reflection in the mirror, I realized I was no longer the trembling woman clutching a pregnancy test. I had changed. I had weathered the storm, and now I was stronger than ever. That was when I knew it was time to return. Not to ask for forgiveness, but to claim what was mine. Chapter 10. Return and the Satisfying Ending. I dressed James in a tiny shirt patterned with little boats, the kind my father used to love. As for myself, I slipped into a floral dress that made me feel both powerful and confident. I knew the time had come, not to return begging or explaining. I returned to reclaim the space that had always rightfully belonged to me and my son. The riverside house rose before me magnificent, with its broad veranda and lush green trees. But this time, I no longer stood outside gazing at it with longing. I walked in as its true owner. Because that was the truth, every document, every deed, every right of ownership bore my name. Andrew was there, disheveled, his shirt, wrinkled eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. Ella was there too, clutching a stack of papers as if they were her last lifeline. They watched me step inside, their eyes flickering between expectation and fear. But I no longer shed tears. I simply set James down on my father's armchair and lifted my head. I didn't come back for you. I came back because this is my son's home. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Andrew rushed forward. I can make it right. I'll do everything. Cook, clean, whatever it takes. Ella chimed in, her voice trembling. I can help with James. I can take care of the house. Just please give me a chance. I looked at them and felt only a strange detachment. They were no longer the people who could terrify me or humiliate me. They were merely two lost souls, scrambling to cling to scraps of power already gone. You think scrubbing floors and folding laundry will redeem you? I said evenly. I don't need that. But if you insist on staying under this roof, remember this, the rules have changed. I am no longer the woman you could trample on. This is my house. This is my son. And you remain here only if you know your place. Penelope once tried to show up still carrying her air of arrogance, but when I turned away in cold silence, refusing to respond, she lasted less than 10 minutes before leaving. She never returned again. Day by day, I watched James grow, crawling across the polished floors, laughing in the sunlit rooms. Every laugh of his was a declaration we had won. Andrew and Ella were now just shadows in this house. They cooked, cleaned, tried to please, but the wall of detachment within me was unbreakable. Forgiveness is not an obligation, and I had no desire to grant it to those who once plotted to destroy me. One afternoon, holding James by the window overlooking the lush garden, I remembered my father's words in his letter, "You are stronger than you think. You are loved more than they ever let you believe. And you deserve this happiness." I smiled. There were no more tears, only peace, pride, and the unshakable certainty that my son would grow up surrounded by true love and protection. They had once called me too dramatic, but in the end they were the ones living in the tragedy they had written for themselves. As for me, I had stepped into a new chapter with freedom with my son and with a strength no one could ever take away. And that is how I stepped out of the darkness, carrying my son and the strength my father left behind to begin a new chapter of my life. I no longer beg for affection or recognition from those who once turned their backs on me. I have found freedom, protection, and pride within myself. If you have ever felt belittled, isolated, or rejected, remember that you are stronger than you think and you are worthy of love and protection. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to Scarlet Vows so you won't miss more powerful journeys of justice and rebirth for women like us.